So before we get started on the next section where we start to create components and so on, I just want to talk a little bit about TypeScript. So the use of TypeScript started in Angular 2, and it's been a huge part of the Angular community. Now, TypeScript is actually not mandatory in order to create Angular applications, but the amount of code and complexity that you would need to write in pure JavaScript is not even close to being worth it to not use TypeScript. Plus, it offers a lot of great benefits. So what exactly is TypeScript? It's actually a superset of JavaScript created by Microsoft. And if you don't know what I mean by superset, it's basically everything that JavaScript is plus more, plus additional features. Okay, it's JavaScript with classes and static typing and some other stuff that I'll talk about. So it all compiles down to regular JavaScript code. The browser can't natively parse TypeScript files, so it has to be compiled down to regular JavaScript. TypeScript also includes many ES6 Plus features and is completely compatible with ES6 and on. All right, so let's take a look at some of those features that TypeScript includes, and this is just some of them. So first we have static typing, hence the name TypeScript. I'll go over static typing in a second. We also have class-based objects. Now it's important to know that classes in JavaScript, just like TypeScript, just like ES6 classes, it's basically syntactic sugar. There's not real classes in the JavaScript language. It just basically sits on top of prototype-based objects. Okay, but it gives us that syntax feel of a real object-oriented language like Java or C# or something like that. Okay, so it's very similar in syntax. We can also import and export modules with TypeScript. We have let and const scoping in place of var, as well as other ES6 Plus features like arrow functions, stuff like that. So it allows us to use the newer features of ECMAScript or JavaScript. So as I mentioned, TypeScript compiles down to regular JavaScript. We need something called the TypeScript compiler to do that, also called TSC. This is included with the Angular CLI as well as a lot of the quick start seeds. So this will compile the .ts files to .js files on the fly. Okay, you can also use TypeScript alone without Angular by running npm install TypeScript, and this would give you just the TSC program, and you could just compile your TypeScript to JavaScript without Angular. All right, so let's talk a little bit about static type checking, which is basically the core feature of TypeScript. So with regular JavaScript or vanilla JavaScript, whatever you want to call it, it's dynamically typed, meaning that we don't have to define our variable types. We don't have to define our function return values as strings or numbers or anything else. And we can also change a variable from a string to a number. It's very dynamic, but it can also be it can be a good thing because it's dynamic and it's less code to write, but it can also be a bad thing because it makes your code less organized and it makes it more prone to errors. With TypeScript, we can define types for our values. But what's even better is it's completely optional. You don't have to use static typing with TypeScript or Angular. It's completely up to you. Now, most Angular developers do use typing. They do use TypeScript. It's there to use, so you might as well use it. There's a lot of benefits to it, and I think a lot of developers find that out once they start using it. So here's a quick example of what you can do with TypeScript. So we're defining a variable here called name, and we're setting it to a string. We're saying whatever is put in this variable of name has to be a string. So we just use colon and then the type. And of course, Brad Traversy within quotes is a string. Now down here, what we're doing is we're defining a function, and you can see we can also add types to the parameters that are passed in. So we're saying num1 and num2, they both have to be numbers. If we don't pass in a number, if we try to pass in a string or a Boolean, then we're going to get an error when we go and compile. Okay, now this right here is a type for the function return. So whatever is returned from add numbers should be a number, or has to be a number. And obviously if we go ahead and we return num1 and num plus num2, which are both numbers, we're going to get a number back. So this would be completely valid. So this kind of makes our code more robust and less prone to errors. Now the available types in TypeScript are strings, numbers, booleans, which are true or false values, arrays, and arrays could be arrays of strings or numbers or booleans or mixed. Any, which is just that, any type at all. Void, which is nothing at all. So for instance, if we say a function should return void, that means it shouldn't return anything at all. We also have null. We have tuples, which are kind of an ordered list or an ordered array. And I'm going to give you some examples of all of these later on. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, we can use classes with TypeScript. This is not Angular code. This is just an example of a TypeScript class. But an Angular component uses a class which is very similar. Same thing with services and other concepts in Angular. But here we just have a class called greeter. We have a property. Okay, so classes can have properties which are basically like attributes. And you can see this greeting property as a type of string. We have a constructor. This is a method. A method is basically a function within a class. So we have two methods here, constructor and greet. Now constructor is a special type of method which runs when the object is instantiated, or in Angular's case when the component is initialized or when the service is injected, things like that. So constructor takes in a message, which is a string, and then we're just setting the message that's passed in to this property here, and we're doing that using the this keyword. Okay, and this is pretty much identical to an ES6 class if you've ever used those. And then the greet function or method just returns hello and then whatever the greeting. And then down here is where we actually initialize or instantiate the object using the greeter class, and we're passing in world, the string world, which gets passed into the constructor. Okay, because the constructor runs as soon as this is instantiated. So that's a basic class, and it works just like a class in any other language. All right, so that's pretty much just a very brief introduction to TypeScript and what you can do. We're going to be learning more about TypeScript and its features all along this course. So in the next section, we're going to start to dive into Angular components.